Music driven noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of jest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor pulls the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows, dissect the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steve Fun Kelly with the center clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Punch Show. Well, trying to figure out this screen thing. Anyway, hope you guys had a great weekend. I think the country had a great weekend with at least 7 million protesters taking to the streets peacefully. I don't care what Grok says. I think it was 7 million. I think it was actually more than 7 million. I think the revisions up to 8.7 million are probably more accurate. But we're going to talk a lot about what all of that means, like the 3.5% rule, which you may have heard of. It's a rule that's established by a lot of research that shows there's never been a case where 3.5% of the population was not actively, where when a 3.5% of the population was actively protesting and did not affect change. Every time you hit that 3.5% threshold, change comes. So we're going to talk about what does that 3.5% mean? Does it mean 3.5% showing up on a single day? Or does it mean something other than that? We're going to dive into what that means and why, as you might wonder, well, why is it only 3.5%? So we're going to go into all of that. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stupid feedback that is coming from the Republicans on this. The first thing is that they say, oh, well, Donald Trump is still president. Yeah, he's president, but he's not the king, and he's not acting like a president. He's acting like a king. It's and they're, oh, well, if he was really a king, you wouldn't be allowed to protest. Well, you know what? In a lot of places where they protested, they weren't allowed to protest. That's a false dichotomy. No, you can 100% have a dictatorial, authoritarian leader that and still have protests. That's why we're having the protests. It's ludicrous. It's just ludicrous to suggest that just because people are protesting, that means he's not being authoritarian. He's still killing people on the open seas. You've got, time after time, he's just bombing boats, making a claim that these are, drug dealers, and we're supposed to take his word for it. That's why we have a judicial branch of government to determine whether or not these things are valid. When you ignore that, when you ignore those things, then that is getting tyrannical. When you can just say, I'm going to kill people or have my military kill them and refer to the military as your military, you're an authoritarian. You're a king. When you have over, I think it's currently there are 50 lawsuits against him for violations of Article 1 of the Constitution. There are another 70 for violations of Article 2 of the Constitution, which is his. And then there are another 50. So 50 for Article 1, 70 for Article 2, another 50 for the judicial branch. Then on top of all of that, there's another 120 over the separation of powers. So altogether, you're talking about around 500 lawsuits just regarding the Constitution. He has violated the First Amendment. He's violated the the freedom of the press by leveraging the federal branch of government against media owners if they don't fire people or settle lawsuits. He's violated the right now a lot of people that are not Christians are having their freedom of religion violated. He's got people being fired or prosecuted for things they said that he doesn't like. He wanted to have a RICO Act violation against people for jeering him, not cheering, jeering him in a restaurant. That's a violation of the First Amendment. He's violated the Third Amendment. Now that's a joke because like the ICE, they can't get they can't use the restrooms. So you never thought the Third Amendment would matter to you, but it does. The Third Amendment, by the way, is the one that says that you you can deny military quarters. He's violated the Fourth Amendment with due process laws. He's violated the Fifth Amendment. He's violated the Sixth Amendment. He's violated the 10th Amendment with the states' rights and sending in the National Guard against the governor's wishes. He's violated the 14th Amendment. He's violated the Constitution so many times, and that is, you get the Republicans saying, "Oh, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic." Well, first of all, learn the difference between a constitutional republic can be a democracy. The things are not mutually exclusive. And so when you go out and you vote, you're participating in a democracy. Whether you're voting for a representative or an issue, it's still a democracy. It's just different types of democracies. Our constitutional republic is a representative democracy. Stop being stupid and saying stupid things. Okay. So that's number one, is this false dichotomy that because we're allowed to protest doesn't mean we don't have a reason to protest. What are we supposed to do? Wait until he takes away that right too? He's already on his way. He's already asked to shoot protesters. He's already shutting them down in states like California and DC. So yeah, I'm sorry. He was elected. True. So were the Nazis. And then they appointed Hitler. So was Mussolini. It's not like in the annals of world history, we haven't had tyrannical leaders and fascist leaders get elected. That's how they start. And then they start taking away the institutions and imposing themselves as dictators. It's a transitorial issue. It's not an event. And that is exactly what the Republicans are doing right now by stripping away our rights one by one and propping up this orange clown makeup, clown brained, narcissistic, obese, obdurate, decadent Caligula wannabe. So yeah, I'm sorry if it offends you that I call Donald Trump a king, because he wants to be one. He wants to be one so bad that he was posting these AI videos of himself as a king. He wants to be one so bad. He's pretending to fly airplanes and dump poop on American cities. Whatever. I don't even know what all that was about. But yeah. So first of all, get out of here with your false dichotomy or your, no true Scotsman type fallacies. No. We can have a protest against a wannabe king and still have a wannabe king at the same time. I know that's possible because that is exactly what happened. So you can't look at something that actually happened and tell me it can't happen. Okay, so that's, you know, but beyond that, I want to get into this rhetoric around the No Kings protests ahead of the protests. Oh, sorry, smoke. Smoke and mirrors, Imagine Dragons. Okay, some jokes about music scene. I don't understand what all that's about. The U.S. government is closed, however, because the information is. I don't know what all that's supposed to be about. Anyway, the next thing I want to get into is this rhetoric about that was heading up into the elections, or up into the protests about, you had the Caroline Levitt on TV talking about how the main constituents of the Democratic Party are Hamas sympathizers and terrorists, and you had, the the whip, the majority whip, what's his name? I can't think of his name. I'm terrible with names already, but especially some things you just better off forgetting. Anyway, so he was on there. He was at the podium and he was calling it a hate America rally. And, so they were talking about all of this stuff. Oh, we hate America and we're terrorists and we're pro Hamas and, you know, anti-American and protecting criminals and racists and thugs and all of this just evil rhetoric. And so what happened is there weren't arrests of protesters. Especially there were, I think, so I tried to find every actual case I could, and there were maybe like around 30 arrests around the protests, and there was a few protesters in Portland, whether it was one or two, I'm not sure what the tally was there. There was some confusion. Some people were reporting it one way and some reporting it the other. But, I think it was like one arrest and then one person detained in Portland. But that was like an ICE facility that was like an adjacent protest. It wasn't actually part of the No Kings protest. And then there was another, I think there was maybe some more arrests along the same lines with the ICE facility in Chicago, and then there was there were some people that were broke off from the main rally, like a dozen in Denver. And they were like walking across this bridge, and then the police told them to disperse. They didn't disperse. It was like a dozen people, and so then they had like 10 minutes to leave or else, and then they got gassed, and I think there were some arrests there. But for the most part, well, not even just for the most part, for the all part, there was not a single person connected with the No Kings rally that was arrested for anything violent. So we were told all of this time that there was going to be this big violent protest. And, they're going to burn down the cities. And, the rhetoric, you've heard it. You don't need me to repeat it. There was 3 arrests. There were 3 arrests for people that were brandishing weapons, though. And I'm going to show you. This is Mary Moriarty. If you can't remember her name, remember she's happy because she's sticking out her tongue right there. And, like James Moriarty of Sherlock Holmes fame. So her name is Mary Moriarty, although she is apparently not a criminal genius like her namesake is. She looks like she's about as smart as the average Trump voter, as indicated by the t-shirt she is wearing, a Trump t-shirt. So yeah, isn't it interesting that the closest thing to terrorism that happened was from a Trump supporter? It wasn't just one of them. There's at least 3 I can find. There was another one that was in Kent. The guy was pushing a girl and pulled out a gun and bunch of protesters jumped on his back and held him down until the police came and arrested him. And then there was another one. I cannot think of where it was. Anyway, there was a third person. He had a Jeep. He was going to get his gun out of his Jeep when he got detained by the police and his Jeep got towed. Oh, well, too bad. So sad. I guess I'll have to cry. But anyway, 3 different cases where MAGAs, all 3 of these people were MAGAs, and all 3 of them were pointing guns at protesters who were peacefully protesting. Right? Every one of the protesters out of 7 million protesters, zero. Don't, like, when they talk about, oh, mostly peaceful protests. No, they were not mostly peaceful. They were entirely peaceful. You can't get mostly peaceful if it's 99.9%. You can say mostly peaceful. When it's 100%, it's just peaceful. You don't need to modify the word peaceful with mostly if it's all peaceful. If I hand you a hamburger and I say this is made of beef, or I say this is made of mostly beef, you're going to want to know what mostly means with the mostly beef burger. What is the rest of it? Right? 100%. When you say this is beef, that means it is all beef. When you say mostly peaceful, that's saying there's some part of it that was not peaceful. No, it was peaceful. The protests were peaceful. The only people that weren't peaceful were not protesters. They were counter-protesters. They were anti-protesters. They were the terrorists. If there was any terrorism, and if you define terrorism as using violence or planning to use violence to evict political change or, political ideology, she's a terrorist. How is she not a terrorist? How am I a terrorist? Because I'm part of this like mythical Antifa group. But the woman that goes and points guns at protesters because she got a feelings boo-boo about them opposing her king, who's the terrorist? Sure not me. And so there's 3. And I just, at first I was just kind of taking it lightly and kind of joking. She's wearing a Trump t-shirt, and just, kind of owning the MAGAs. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I just started to realize how close were we to a mass shooting event? Where's the calls for toning down the rhetoric? One right-wing nut job shoots Charlie Kirk, who is another right-wing nut job, and a bunch of other right-wing nut jobs blame the liberals for, the one right-wing nut job shooting the other right-wing nut job. But when liberals are having a peaceful parade or a peaceful protest and right-wing nut jobs show up and point guns at them, where's the calls for, toning down the rhetoric? Mike? Come on, Mike. You're sitting there, you're on every TV show there is. I'm surprised you're not on Family Circus yet. Maybe you are. I don't know. But you're on every single network sitting there complaining about how the Democrats shut down the government and you've done your job and you don't have to worry about seating elected representatives because you're so afraid of what's going to happen if people find out what exactly Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's relationship is. You're so terrified of that you won't even seat a duly elected representative. But you have time to do all that. You don't have the time to just say one sentence. Hey, maybe we shouldn't be going to rallies of, liberal rallies and pointing guns at people. Especially if you're going to be talking about how everybody who disagrees with you is a terrorist, then how about you actually rebuke the actual terrorists who are actually trying to terrorize people, Mike? He's so smug. Anybody else got a problem with that? Anyway. Yeah, there was a guy in Detroit that was okay. I didn't hear about this one. It's hard to keep up, or it's hard to find them because they like get buried down in the news cycles. Like they don't want to talk. If there was one uh protester that had a gun, everybody would know his name right now. Instead, nobody knows who Mary Moriarty is. But this is where we're at. Where are the Republicans calling to tone down the rhetoric? And they can only surmise one thing: they don't want the rhetoric toned down because they like it. They want somebody to get killed, because as soon as somebody gets killed, they're going to blame it on the liberals. And then they're just going to use that as an excuse to drum out more military. So I don't want to seem hyperbolic here, but this is why we have to have these no kings movements, because what they are doing is institutionalizing a king. All right. So the next stupid talking point that I just wanted to address, because by Jove, it needs to be addressed, is this notion of, oh, nobody cares. It's, it's only 7 million people. Okay. This bar on the left that you may or may not be able to see, it's like this little red sliver here. That is the cumulative total of all of Donald Trump's 2024 campaign rallies combined. And this is based on crowd counting consultation, which is, the kind of quintessential benchmark for these things. They said there's an average of 5,600 per rally, and there were 28 documented rallies. So if you get 28 times 5,600, you end up around 250,000 rally participants in all of the rallies combined. That does not mean unique participants either. So some of those are also double counted. Actually, a lot of those are double counted and quintuple counted, because there was this whole trend, you'd see these people, oh, this is my 7th rally. Okay. So anyway, 250,000 total, even if you count, Engelbert Humperdinck or whatever, 11 times. All right. This is just the No Kings rally, just the one rally. There were 7 million and possibly more, there is a huge difference. So this idea that, and I'll get into this more later, this notion that the rally is the protest is the totality of everybody who disagrees with Trump, and therefore nobody else disagrees with him, is just stupid. It's like, I don't know if there's something in the MAGA hats. I don't know if the bands are put on too tight, and it's like it just cuts off the blood supply to the brain. I don't know what goes on, but it's like the moment they flip on that MAGA switch, it's like they turn off their brain. I know people that have PhDs that are MAGAs, and you can talk to them about anything else and they're smart. Start talking about politics and boom, there goes the lights, and boom, we're in darkness. They turn off their brains. They just dive into a pool of stupid that is like oceanic in its depth. So anyway, I think I just accidentally got somebody's attention. Anyway, so there you go. Just a tad more at the protest than all of Trump's rallies combined for the entire 2024 election cycle. So that's a bit of a difference. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to talk about this thing called the 3.5% rule. And what that is is there is a couple of historians that looked into they looked at 332 protests, and they it's called the tipping point. Why the 3.5% tipping point, and their names were Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stephen. And they looked at over 300 political movements, not 300 protests, 300 political movements throughout history, like since 1900, I want to say. And they looked at what succeeded and what didn't succeed. When does a political movement work? And what they found is, first of all, nonviolent protests are twice as effective as violent protests. And the second thing they found out is that there's never been a case where 3.5% of the population got engaged in active protest, continual active protest, and did not effect change. Like, you know, whatever they were trying to change got changed once you got to 3.5%. So you might look at the No Kings protest from Saturday, and it's, you know, right there. If it's 7 million people and we have 340 million people in the country, the math is not hard to do there. That's about 2% of the country. And that's, you know, not looking at voting age population or whatever. It's just looking at, you know, 2% of the population, which, you know, is a smaller percentage, because obviously there are people that aren't voting age. Anyway, so 7 million people, 2% of the population. Does that mean that the 2%, is that what they're looking at with the 3.5% rule? It's not. And so we're going to go into this whole thing. I'm going to spend as much time as I need to on this, but basically the rest of the show, I'm just going to be talking about this. All right. Now, I'm going to be I'm going to be looking at this screen. So if you leave something in the comments, I'll read it when I get back to it. And yes, specious, like the name. Cult mentality is a scary thing. It is. It's like it's just reality ceases to matter for some reason. So here I'm going to this. This is a series of charts that I created, and we'll go through all of these details in a bit. Okay, so first, what are the major protests? These are not all of the protests that are involved. These are just the main protests since Trump took office. There was the People's March with about 50,000 people. There was the 50-51 protest that had 72,000. There was the Hands Off protest, which had 4 million. There was the Day of Action, which had 3 million. And then there was May Day. I'm not familiar with that one. I should have looked more into it. But anyway, that one's 600,000. And then the two No Kings protests. And this one, I ended up, even just in case people want to complain about the numbers, went with a little lower end of the spectrum. So that is a timeline of the major protests. I just realized something. So sorry, I thought I had gotten all of these things ready, but there's a lot of charts. Okay. So I wanted to review. So here. All right. At least I'm not live or anything, right? I'm not just sitting here. Okay. So this is a comparison of 2017 versus 2025. This is number of protests. This is not number of protesters. All right. And the number of protests, and like some of these does not mean like this one is, like these ones that are 3,000. That's like the No Kings protest, or the hands off protest, where you had multiple protests across the country at the same time. So these are not 3,000 individual protests. This is like No Kings consisted of, almost 3,000 protests across the country. But what I want to do is just compare. There is a difference in energy and in quantity with 2017. In 2017, it started strong and then it waned, right? It wasn't building momentum. But with this protest, it's building. And this is only counting like the major protests. This is not counting, if you watch Rachel Maddow at all, she covers this a lot. Just town after town, city after city. There are these unrelated protests that go on like almost every single day, every single weekend across the country. This is not counting those protests. So when you talk about sustained protest activity, you have to include those too, but that's not in the numbers. I looked for the numbers. I cannot find the numbers. There's no tracking method for it. But there are millions of people that are protesting against Donald Trump's tyranny on a consistent basis. And it's not just a few, it's thousands of protests. And it's not just Saturday that it happened. It's every week, every day, people are protesting against Donald Trump's fiefdom. So here, I just want to show the difference in both volume and consistency. Okay. So now let me go back to where did you go? So that we'll go back here now. All right. These are, I'll have a Substack published in a bit. I tried to write, I had it all done writing, but there was some issues with publishing. It might be related to the Amazon, but I couldn't publish on Substack this morning. So now let's take a look at cumulative participation, because this is where you start to go, okay, I'm starting to understand now why this is a big deal. Okay. You'll have some people that participated in June at that No Kings parade, but did not participate in the most recent, or in Saturday's No Kings parade. You'll also have people that participated in, participated in both. I'm sorry, trying to find my brain here. So you'll have people that participated in one protest or another protest. You'll also have people that protested in multiple protests, and you'll have some people who aren't even counted. And we'll get to that in a moment. But right now, if you just were to take and try to estimate, like the crossover and the overlap at all of the protests, we actually hit 3.5% is about 12.7 million people. And we hit that landmark way back in June with the first No Kings parade. Now we're up to 18.7 million. That's getting closer. We're closer to 6% than 3.5% now, because it's a cumulative effect. It's not just a one-time thing. This is not just like a one-day event. That's not what they mean by 3.5%. They mean sustained. I think they define it as sustained protest activity. So there are also, you can argue there are some people that just went out on a Saturday and protested because they thought it would be a fun day thing to do with their Saturday. Not quite sure why anybody would do that. But even if you say 1/3 of these people were just protesting for kicks, we're still over the threshold. So that's interesting. Okay. So I'm sorry, the threshold is 11.7 million, not 12.7 million. I don't know why. Oh, that's because that's total participants. But yeah, so sorry for that. You get my gist, right? That this is not just what happened on one day. This is what has been building ever since Trump was inaugurated. And you see it's growing faster. It's not waning. It's building steam. We're a snowball going downhill. We're getting bigger, not smaller. And so then you might say, well, even then, 78 million people or whatever it was voted for Trump. That's valid. And I'm also, because I just see so many of this stupid argument. Nobody's saying he's not elected. Nobody's saying he's not president. What we're saying is that he's abusing his power. And some of you are arguing and letting him. So there's something else that, actually, you know what? I forgot to. So this is in terms of a percent of the population that participated in each rally. Just in case you're interested. But I kind of missed my chance to talk about that. But so now we're going to talk about the sympathizers. And sympathizers means there are a lot of people that can protest or that did not protest but agree with the protesters. You can't just assume everybody that disagreed with the protest didn't, or everybody that didn't go to the protest didn't agree with it, because that's just dumb. I mean, I pointed out 1 in 50 people protested on Saturday, and we have, oh, well, that means the other 49 are for Trump, and it's like, your MAGA hat's on too tight. No, that is not what it means. In fact, it means kind of the opposite. There are various reasons that people do not show up to protest. Some don't have the means, some don't have the health, and some people are afraid. And especially when you've got people that are they're not here illegally, but maybe their dad is, maybe they're in a split home, and you've got all this stuff going on about facial recognition software and how people are going to be identified, and you don't want to go to the protest to protect your dad from being deported, and then as a result of your going, having your face run through all this facial recognition software, and then people showing up to your dad's house to arrest him because you protested. So there are some people that don't go because they can't go. They don't have the money. Some people that don't go because they don't have the health. And some people don't go because they're afraid of protesting, because this is what tyrants do, right? They try to intimidate. Yeah, and you had all kinds of talk about, we're going to be terrorists, and the National Guard is going to be ready. Greg Abbott had the National Guard ready to go in Austin. I wonder what Ron DeSantis seemed to miss the boat on this one. Didn't he get the memo that we're all supposed to? Anyway, he could have shown up in his white boots and acted like a military guy. Maybe he did something, and I don't know. Anyway, it's like a right-wing nut job competition. So they there are studies that have been built upon the original 3.5% research. And what they've learned is that for every protester, there are anywhere from 5 to 50 sympathizers, people that are sympathetic to the protest cause that, for various reasons, did not participate. Okay. So even if you're only using the 5-to-1 ratio, which is the smallest ratio that I could find, like, so if you take that as the minimum, then you're talking about just at yesterday's or in Saturday's protest, that's 30 million just from the one protest that they represented. The 5 million that protested, and then the 25 million sympathizers. But again, that's just the one protest. That's not the sustained protest. That's just the one day. If you look at going back and you look at the cumulative effect, well, then you get to really realize something. Okay. So there, if you look at the 18.7, well, actually, just want to, if you look at more moderate, like a 10% or 12.5%, then you're starting to talk with, like if you get the mid 12.5%, which is the average, that is, what we would expect. That's 75 million. You're already getting into, now you're talking about the number that's starting to exceed even the number of people that voted for Trump. And that's just from the one day. That's just from the one day. Now, when you get into the total impact, now you start to see why the Republicans are so terrified of this movement. Why they need to call us Antifa and call us terrorists and then try to diminish it at the same time. Oh, Mike Johnson, I'm just glad that they were able to have this protest without killing anybody or whatever, as though, the last one there was anything, or they feel like they need to. Anyway, I don't even want to get in on the George Floyd protests, which were deliberately sabotaged by right-wing antagonists and agitators. All right. So let's go into this. This is the total impact of all of these protests. Okay. You're talking about the high, or okay, so if you're talking about just the lowest, even at just 5% or 5-to-1 ratio, right? That's 76.3 million. Now we're definitely, even conservatively, even the most conservative numbers have the number of protesters starting to eclipse Trump's vote in 2024. All right. So let's talk about those voters in 2024 and what it means in terms of our conversation. Because one, Trump isn't running in 2028. So That's not relevant. I don't care how many hats he hands out. The Constitution, he can't go that far. Even the Supreme Court isn't going to go that far. They're not going to bend over backwards that far, in terms of just ignoring there is an actual amendment that limits him. But even setting that aside, I'm sorry. Let's set that aside. This notion that he's running in 2028. The relevance is to 2026, and that's what we need to talk about. People aren't. Everybody that voted for Trump is not going to vote and show up in 2026. Presidential elections are larger. He has coattails. I'm not going to deny that. He has a populist appeal that appeals to some people. I don't understand why. I find him repulsive, but like just even physically, which is why they have to like make him look like something other than he does. But setting aside his, cult following, which, you can't, like there's not a history of people that step in and take over a cult and make progress. Maybe you could say like Brigham Young or something, but generally cult leaders don't hand off their cults to other cult leaders. Who's going to take it over? JD Vance? We'll couch that for later. Is it going to be Donald Trump Jr.? Eric Trump? Eric Trump's talked about, he's going to, he's floated the idea of running. Can you imagine being so desperate that you voted for Eric Trump? I mean, you might as well just run Beavis. Or is he Butthead? I forget which one is which. Anyway, Eric Trump's not winning. So 2028 is not, we don't know who's going to run for either side. But 2026, to get 76 million people out in an off-cycle election is unprecedented. It's unheard of. That's where you start flipping the House, even with all of their little attempts at gerrymandering. And it's where you start flipping the Senate. And that's where you start being able to rein in the tyranny some. Because right now, he just threatens everybody with, primary. And you got people in these red districts. But it doesn't take as much money and it doesn't take as much energy to flip some of these red districts as people might think. One, there's a few reasons for that. One, they're not happy. These numbers are not just liberals and independents who are getting enraged. They're farmers who bet their farm on Trump and lost their farm because of Trump. From 1980 to 2025, we lost 500,000 privately owned farms. From 2025 to 2030, we're expected to lose another 400,000. And those privately owned farms are going to be bought up by corporate farms. And there's reasons for that. Tariffs are hitting these farmers hard. And and we look at the export side of things, right? The soybean farmers, they're getting hurt. But actually the soybean farmers, for all the attention they've gotten, are actually some of the ones the best off. And I'm not saying they're well off. I'm saying it's even worse for the other farmers. Partly because the The most of the, like the larger farmers are like your soybean farmers and your corn farmers. And so a lot of the stuff is automated, so they're not as hit with the mass deportation policies. We also need to look at the things like fertilizer, which is way up because most of our fertilizer comes from Canada. We need to look at things like feed. The price of feed goes up. You want to know why beef is so expensive? Well, one, the cost of feed is way up. And number two, the mass deportations are taking away all the beef farmers or ranchers, whatever you want to call them. It's taking away all their personnel. Then the ones that make it through all that, the meat packing industry is being gutted by mass deportations. And it's not just that, oh, well, not everybody's been deported, but everybody's afraid to show up for work because ICE, for all their talking, is not going after the criminals. They're avoiding the criminals. They don't want to get killed. I mean, you just got, Billy Bob Robertson had just hiked on his overalls and stretched them over his big, fat, gravy sealed belly, got $50K to go and round up some illegals. And so that's what he didn't sign up for this fight with drug cartel stuff. He wants to be sitting there yucking it up with 20 of his buddies as they bring down a 38-year-old Hispanic woman who's dropping off her kids at school. These guys have about as much aggregate courage as a watermelon. Not even that, maybe like a cranberry or something. They're gutless, except for their, actual giant, prodigious guts. I mean, but in terms of courage, they don't have any guts. So, sorry, I don't know who this guy is or what. No, I don't think Trump will dissolve Congress. I think Trump is. I think Trump is cowing Congress. I think he has literally stripped Congress of its constitutional duties, and they have just gleefully acquiesced. So I don't know if that answers your question. All right. So that's, Donald Trump. Sorry, I got distracted by my. Okay, so now let's look at what the cumulative protest and sympathizers comes out to. This is where you really start going, When you start looking at the cumulative numbers, even the 5%, you're talking about 112 million versus 76 million or 78 million Trump voters. People are pissed. People are pissed. And they're pissed on the farms, and they're pissed in the cities, and they're pissed in the suburbs because everybody's prices are going up. If you look at the way that tariffs are hitting and the prices that are going up, if you strip goods up into split goods up into three categories: essential, semi-essential, and non-essential. So like essential spending would be food, right? Gas. And if you look at semi-essential, you're looking natural gas for your house, car insurance, things like that, things that you actually have to have. Then you've got your semi-essential things, and then you've got your just I can't think of the word, like the official word, but just stuff you want, your wants. You don't need them, just stuff you want to spend money on. And that includes things like going to Disneyland. The more you need something, the more the price is going up, and the less you need something, the more the price is going down. So even the tariffs hitting the consumers are hitting consumers that don't have money a lot harder than consumers that do have money. And I'll give you an example of why. There's a break for the car manufacturers, and everybody talks about, oh, the car manufacturers are getting a break. And that is, like, I mean, nobody should need a break because there shouldn't be tariffs. But when you're talking about the spending, when you're talking about consumption, consumer spending, if you're making $18,000 a year, you're not going out and buying a brand new car. So that is not affecting you. That, oh, I don't have to pay this tariff on this car. Now, going forward, people might be having to pay. But because of that, the price of cars is not going up. And the price of Disneyland and plane fares are going down because those are just discretionary spending. So people that don't have that money don't spend it. But the things like food is up like 7%. And depending on what kind of food, beef is up like, I think it's 13 or 14%. And coffee's up 22%. And everybody knows that coffee is a necessity. So the poorer you are, the harder the tariffs are hitting you, right? And so when you're talking about these farms, and they're the ones that are getting hurt. And when you talk about these rural communities that are supported by these farms, they're the ones that are getting hurt. When you talk about the hospitals that are going to be closing, those are in these rural areas. So, you can talk all you want, and I understand it. I understand the glee that comes from watching the leopard eat the farmer's face that, he voted for. I get it. But that doesn't mean they're going to go back in 2026, hopefully, and vote for the same people again. They are starting to turn. I'm not saying they're turning overwhelmingly, but they don't need to turn overwhelmingly. The Republicans act like there was just this massive, overwhelming mandate. There wasn't. He won the popular vote, but he didn't win a majority of the vote. He won it in a plurality, which is, the technical jargon would be he barely won. It is not like, oh, well, all the bellwether counties went back and forth. Well, that's what happens. That's, when these razor thin elections, things go back and forth. It's just normal. But if they go back and forth, that means they can come back again. We don't need 25 million people to change the tide. We only need like 1 million. If 1 million Republicans change their mind, we would win this next election in a landslide. And I don't mean the presidential. I mean, we would win back the House. We would win back the Senate. And that would mean we could win back protection of our country from the tyrant. I don't know if we're going to get enough to impeach him and convict him, but we can at least get enough to stop enabling him. And that's a really, really significant thing. We are right now building up a movement that can win back the Congress and can win back the Senate. And that's all we can do right now. That's all we can do right now. But that's a lot. That's a lot. So, like, keep that in mind when you're just giving up hope. I think one thing that happened on Saturday was a lot of people found a lot of hope just by the people around them, and even people that couldn't go found hope in watching the rallies on the TV sets. These things mattered. They matter to us. So, you know, I was thinking of this today, like when people were saying, well, what can we do? And I thought of this phrase that I really like. This is our what can you do for your I'm sorry. This is our what can you do for your country moment. Like, let's stop doom scrolling, and let's stop just yelling at the Democrats like Chuck Schumer, who is, like, I admit, about as useful as a moldy sock. I'm not defending Chuck Schumer, but me complaining about Chuck Schumer accomplishes exactly as much as me defending Chuck Schumer, which is to say, not a darn thing. All right. We need to start looking forward and stop looking backwards. We need to start looking at solutions and not just looking at problems. And right now, the biggest solution we have is to change who is in the White House, or changing who is in the House of Representatives and who is in the Senate. And that's the only way we are going to make any significant change. And it's not just there either. If you live in a state like I do, like Texas, change who's in your state legislature, change who's in your state Senate. Be active, be mobile, be positive. Be aware that if you do things, you can change things. We need to believe in ourselves again and stop believing that we've lost before we've even started. We can win. We can. We've done it before. As a matter of fact, if you go back to 1988, George Bush won the popular vote in 1988. From then on, since then, we've only had one Republican win the majority of the vote. And he did it in his second term after the closest election in American history. So if he had not won that, he would not have won in 2004. So this notion, this ridiculous, silly notion that we can't change things back just because we lost by razor thin margins in 2024, that's self-defeatist. Why let the Republicans, why do the Republicans work for them? Why let them just win without having to fight? Everybody says don't obey in advance. I say don't surrender in advance. But do it peacefully. Like I said, 2-1. You're twice as likely to succeed if we do this peacefully. So I'm all for peaceful protests, not for violent protests. Just got to say that for Mike Johnson. Like, we can do more. We can be better. And if you don't like anybody that's running, consider running. And if you don't like anybody that's running and you can't run, recruit somebody. Like, we need to stop looking at the Democratic Party for leadership, and we need to become a grassroots movement. You don't change grassroots movements from the sky down. You change them from the grass up. That's why they're called grassroots. You change them from the ground up. That's why they're called grassroots movements, because they start at the ground. So don't look at the, Senate minority leader. Look at your neighbor. Look at your VOA or your VFW. Look at your neighborhood church or, the people around you. What can you do to change where you are? Whether you're in a big city like Chicago or a little tiny town like Elgin. What can you do to make change? What can you do to effectuate change? We need to stop looking at what can our government do for us, and we need to start doing what can we do for our country. This is our moment. When JFK gave that speech, he motivated a nation. He changed a generation. And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he was perfect, but there were things that came out of that. There was the Peace Corps came out of that. There was the moon landing that came out of that. So there's hope in change, but there's only hope in change if we believe that we can effectuate the change. Change is something that's caused by us, not change that happens to us. At least not if it's a positive change. So I think that's my bit on this. I just want to encourage you and myself that we can do better and that we have to be better, but we can't do that just complaining. So, anyway, that is today's show. Thanks for watching. I'll have a Substack up in whenever it can be up, whenever they figure out their problem with publishing, and I'll post that on the various places this is streamed to. But thanks again, and it's all right. We'll talk to you later. We should be the change we want in the world. Amen. Great way to sign off.